Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda. That's my most bizarre greeting to date.
Yes, I agree. And hello, David, and welcome to our listeners across the world and in this country, Canada, Mexico, Latin America, the UK, Europe, Pakistan, India, and all the countries that are that I haven't mentioned yet.
And Albania,
South Korea. Yeah, David, you're looking particularly handsome and dapper today. Anyway, welcome everyone to episode 322 of the Feeling Good podcast. But yes, you are looking kind of handsome and dapper. Not that you don't always.
Thank you.
We have a guest today, Kevin Cornelius, a very special guest.
Yes.
He's a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice at the Feeling Good Institute. He conducts in-person counseling for teens and adults in Mountain View, California, and he also offers online video therapy for anyone, anywhere living in California. He's a certified level 4 advanced team CBT therapist and trainer, and Kevin is available for consultation for other therapists. His website is Tools for Change, and that's tools, TOOLS, the number 4, change, CHANGE.me, and he can be reached at kevin@feelinggoodinstitute.com. But the most remarkable thing about Kevin is that he's the father of 3-year-old twins and a 4-year-old child, and you get a lot of credit for that, Kevin.
And let me introduce you, Kevin. I think all that official title stuff probably bores people to death. Maybe not, but I like to introduce people as I know them. And every now and then in your life, you come across somebody who strikes you as being not very bright. Somebody who's incredibly intelligent and combines that with tremendous compassion. And our dear Matt May, who joins us on many podcasts, is such a person, and Jill Levitt is such a person, and Rhonda, you're such a person. But Kevin, you came to our Tuesday training group not long ago to pick up team therapy, and you picked it up so fast, but I could see right away you were a person with depth and compassion and warmth, and that's why I fought so hard to keep you in the group and get you to do your practice at the Feeling Good Institute and become a part of our family. And I'm just so proud of you, and it's just been a joy to know you, and I'm excited to have you on today's podcast.
Hear, hear.
Wow, that is so kind. I'm blown away, and I'm so excited to be here. I feel like I need to say my own hello to everybody, but I don't want to steal your shtick, David. So,
well, we could do it together on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Hello.
You didn't join us, Rhonda.
That's because I narcissistically assumed you were saying hello to me.
Okay. Yes. All right. So we'll let it go at that, because why not?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me read, before we jump in with our topic with you, Kevin, let me read an endorsement that we got. And then we also want to wish people a happy holiday, whatever holiday you celebrate, because we're beginning the holiday season with this podcast, or we're in the midst of the holiday season. I'm sure David will want to wish everyone a happy holiday, and Kevin too. But let me first start off by reading this endorsement from a very beloved team therapist and physician from Pakistan, Rizwan, and he wrote us about episode 318, which David titled, The Horrific World Events, Can Team CBT Help Us? Part 2 of 2. And Rizwan wrote, here David shows us how a sticky but solvable interpersonal problem can be a microcosm of an out of one's control, unsolvable political problem in a country, and how the sufferer remains engaged with the unsolvable political problem at the cost of an interpersonal relationship. And when the sufferer solves the interpersonal problem through the relationship journal, a team CBT tool that David designed, a whole new era of opportunities dawn on him or her. It not only brings two individuals close, but the relationship journal also teaches the sufferer how to develop happy and helpful relationships with everyone, including the chaotic political environment. This also mitigates the impact of the political problem on oneself. This podcast shows that the 5 secrets also enable one to put forward one's political views in a more palatable way to one's political opponent. David also modeled an out-of-this-world 5 secrets for Mina in this podcast. Superb teachings. Thank you, dear Iranian friend. We all felt very close to you. Thank you, Prophet David, for revisiting planet Earth to guide the lost souls. You also dexterously steered clear of the minefield of political controversy and kept your heart focused on self-help. Hats off to you. And thank you too, Rhonda. We can't imagine a podcast without you. Rizwan.
Well, thank you, Rizwan. I just loved your note, and especially that part about Prophet David. And if any of you haven't heard the podcast that was released yesterday,
it was released November 14th, which was
part 2 was November. 14th. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Our yesterday, but it's not yours due to the relativity of time and the time warp that we're in. But it was on December 14th. Right, and the week before that, which was December 7th, that was part 1 and part 2 of that Can Team Help with Horrific World Events. And it was personal work from a woman disguised with the name of Mina, and what a beautiful transformation we saw in her life in that one single therapy session, and with an amazing outcome. So if you haven't heard it, make sure you do. There's something there for the general public in terms of personal relationships and how we create our own personal hell that we're complaining about, but we don't realize that, and how to stop doing that and transform troubled relationships and quickly. And there's a lot there for therapists too who want to learn the team model. But let's get on to the very exciting topic for today, the recovery coefficient. And I know all of you have been talking about this and feel tremendous excitement about this mathematical coefficient that I have invented, which sounds about as exciting as dust in the desert. But it's actually something that's tremendously exciting and tremendously challenging. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself and what brought you to this topic, and then we can look at some of your data and your own daily mood log and talk about the mind-boggling implications of what we're going to talk about today.
Thank you so much, David. I am super excited about the recovery coefficient. And the reason why is I heard you talk about it recently. You were on another podcast, the one with Angela Poach, and you brought up this topic, and it kind of inspired me, got me really excited, because I love the idea of using the testing in order to help us become better therapists. It seems like that's the reason why we're using it, to help the client do better in their therapy. And so the idea that we can take a look at scores before and after the first session to determine our skill level as a therapist and to see where we have room for improvement, that just got me really, really excited and interested. And now that I've learned a little bit more about the topic from you, I find it even more fascinating.
Thank you. What we're talking about really is an accidental discovery that I made at the Feeling Good Institute. The reason I developed these scales were, how are you feeling at the start of the session? How angry are you? How depressed are you? How anxious are you? And the end of the session was to solve a puzzle that occurred to me when I was teaching at Penn Medical School, maybe what had to be a good 30 years ago. But it seems like yesterday, and I was talking to a group of psychiatric residents, and I said, we don't even know when recovery occurs, because we're not measuring anything. We don't know if it occurs within sessions or between sessions or never. And wouldn't it be awesome if we could develop scales that we could answer that question and see and find out exactly how effective we are in every single therapy session. And that's why I developed the brief mood survey with short, highly accurate scales that show us how the patient's feeling at the start to the end of a therapy session. And let's say your depression test goes from, my depression test goes from 0 to 100, just to make it simple. Oh, no, let's say 0 to 20. It goes 0 to 20, but you can represent it 0 to 100 if you like. But the actual raw score goes from 0 to 20, and 20 is the worst depression a human being can have, and 0 would be no depression whatsoever. That's joy, euphoria, usually, and then it also occurred to me that if we look at the amount of improvement in a session, let's say a patient starts with a score of 18, that would be beyond severe depression. That would be getting into the unbelievable, horrible depression range. That's what you would see at the Stanford inpatient unit. Somebody receiving electroconvulsive therapy, probably for their depression. That's that bad. And then let's say in a single session, you could go from a score of 18 at the start, and the patient gives you a 9 at the end. So that's an improvement of 9 points or 50%. And so I said, we'll call that the recovery coefficient. And if that happened in a single hour therapy session, a 50% reduction in someone's depression, we could say two things. First, the patient would be jumping up and down with joy because of the fantastic improvement they got in a single 1 hour session. Because 50% improvement is more improvement than you see in psychotherapy outcome studies with all known treatments, with every school of therapy and every type of medication. You're lucky if you get some of your patients with a 50% improvement in a year of treatment. And so if you're getting it in a single session that much, you're getting as much change in the patient in one session as the rest of the world of psychology and psychiatry can do in a year. You're literally several hundred times more effective. So that would be mind-blowing. And then what I also discovered in a study I did at the Feeling Good Institute, and I'll shut up here in just a second, but I'm just trying to set the table for our banquet. I discovered that if you measure that at the first time a therapist meets with a patient, that quantity, which I call the recovery coefficient, which is simply the percent improvement in the first meeting or any meeting, that predicted all the changes throughout the entire course of therapy. In other words, that that was an actual estimate of the therapist's skill. And this is the first time, I think, in history that we've now have a method where you can quickly assess any therapist's skill in a single therapy session, and you can measure it out to several decimal points because the measures are highly reliable, highly accurate measures. And you can get your skill in the treatment of depression, in the treatment of anger, in the treatment of anxiety, in the boost in happiness. You can say how effective are you at boosting a patient's happiness in a single therapy session. In marital discord, if that's what you're treating, or relationship discord. And so it's very exciting to have this measure available for the first time. And if you put it in your chart, which Kevin has done and brought his data to us, you can then see how the patient does over time. Do they lose the gains between sessions? Do they eventually get their scores all the way down to zero? What happens, and how long does it take the patient to go into complete recovery, or what we could actually call a state of enlightenment? We have the answers to you. Kevin has brought us the data, but it's also very threatening to therapists. You have to check your ego at the door, because you might find out, as have found out sometimes, that when I'm with patients, I think I've done a great job. And then I find out when I look at the end of session data that the patient actually became more upset, and that I thought I was doing well and I'd actually screwed up, or I got a bad score on empathy. But if you keep your ego out of it, you can use that data the next time you meet with the patient to say, wow, I really screwed up in the session last week. And tell me what happened and what I said that hurt your feelings or turned you off. And then you can turn that bad experience into a great experience and develop a breakthrough with that patient. But it takes a unique kind of therapist who has integrity and courage to the Robert Burns, the Scottish poet, no relative, but he said, "Oh, wad the power, the gift he gave us to see ourselves as others see us." In other words, if only we could see ourselves as others see us. And this allows therapists to see yourself as your patient sees you. And the information is often shocking, but what a fantastic opportunity for growth and learning and training and development. And I've also wondered, why don't we have a pay system based on this? And so therapists would all be required to measure their recovery coefficients and then publish that data in their solicitation of patients. And that's kind of what we're doing today. And if you can get high recovery coefficients and get people better in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 sessions, maybe you should be paid more than therapists who sit and talk to people for months or years with no measurable change in symptoms. End of lecture. Back to you, Kevin.
So, Kevin, you were listening to a different podcast and thought, I'm going to start charting out my recovery coefficients. Is that what happened?
Yeah, because I keep a chart record for every patient already, just from David's toolkit, right? The spreadsheet where you always record what the numbers were, so that I can review it really easily with them at the end of session. So I thought it was a Friday afternoon and I'm watching this, this video podcast, and I thought, well, I could do that. I could see what my recovery coefficient is. What is it? And I calculated it really quickly, and I don't know what the scale is to compare it to understand to interpret the score. So my interpretation of my score was that it was pretty terrible. It seemed pretty low. And so it was somewhat upsetting, but also just confusing. And I had some questions and was trying to learn as much as I could from it. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned from you, David, and your Tuesday group is, as much as I can, leave my ego out of everything.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with patients and their recovery, right? And if there's something that I need to know so that I can get better at what I'm doing, I want to know that, even if that knowledge might hurt at first or might be hard to hear. Right. So at first I thought that the information was hard to hear, and I sent you an email and asked you a couple of questions, and but I've learned from you since then some information that helped me just understand how to use that data effectively. And I can look at that one first session. I could look at the first time that I meet with somebody, and also the last time that I meet with somebody, and see what's the total change over the course of therapy, and learn from that also, and that's valuable information as well. So hopefully what I'm saying is adding to the conversation here. But
let's look at the data right now.
Yeah. Okay.
And
great.
I've got it up here on my computer, and it can be really quite surprising. Here. Well, first of all, you've got 50-minute sessions and then extended sessions, like double sessions. Let's look at your 50-minute session data, and then I think we have a summary of it, also chart record summaries. I'll look at this summaries, and I told you to do 10 patients and see what your average recovery coefficient is in a single hour. And patient number 1 improved by 50% in a session. Now, keep that in mind. If you've ever gone for the treatment of depression, did you ever have a therapy session where you improved 50% in a single therapy session? And then here's patient number 2, 80% improvement. Patient number 3, 25%. Patient number 4, 50%. Patient number 5, 40%. Patient number 6, 44%. Then 28%, 50%, 100%, and 83%. Those are fantastic numbers. And your average depression recovery coefficient is minus 45.13%. Now that's in only one 1-hour session. And that, if you look at outcome studies for cognitive therapy by the top cognitive therapists in the world, 6 months of cognitive therapy, like the one was done in England, it's supposed to be the strongest evidence in the world for the effectiveness at cognitive therapy. Only 44% of their patients got a 50% improvement in depression in 6 months. And then they did a 2-year evaluation, and it was no better.
Wow.
So essentially, Kevin, you're getting more improvement in an hour than the top therapist in England were able to produce in 6 months of intensive cognitive therapy, and then two years of cognitive therapy. And if you look at all the outcome studies in the world literature, the average improvement is about this much. 44% for any school of therapy is the most you're going to see after 6 to 12 months of treatment. But how about anxiety? I'm sure you didn't do any good on anxiety, and your anxiety recovery coefficient was 47% in one 1-hour session, and your score on empathy, your average empathy score, which goes from 0 to 100, 0 to 20, was 19.6. So that's virtually perfect scores on my very sensitive empathy scale that most therapists will be failing on. And so this is pretty incredible data. And it just shows how our own perceptions of how we're doing can be way off base. And in your case, Kevin, you're thinking that you suck or something. And this to me is showing, someone who the numbers say this guy must be one of the greatest therapists on planet Earth. And but also like the rest of us, I'm sure you'll have sessions where you screw up and patients are worst at the end, and then you've got to talk to them about things. But we'll look at some more of your data in a minute. But tell me your reaction to what I just said.
Well, I think that whenever I hear you talk about the poor outcome studies for most therapy that exists, right, and even cognitive therapy, which is more effective than most therapy, it's shocking to me, right? Like I think that most people who are seeking therapists don't know that
right.
That that most therapy is not really even more effective than placebo, right?
Yeah, right.
And of course, therapists aren't going to go around touting that, right, as a way to try to entice people to psychotherapy. But so that's one of the things that I like about using team is that it keeps us honest, right?
Yeah.
Those numbers can't lie to me, right?
Right.
They can only tell me the truth. And, much like with our patients, the truth is what sets them free from their distorted thinking, right? When they're overwhelmed by negative feelings. And only the truth about how we're doing as a therapist is going to allow us to be that free from poor therapy skills, right? We have to know what it is that we're doing and how effective we are if we're going to ever improve. That's what I think, and that's why I've been drawn to what you teach since I first attended a workshop with you. So,
did it take courage to do what you did to calculate these things and then get my interpretation? Was it frightening?
It was a little bit frightening. Well, it was frightening when I first looked at it because, I don't know what the numbers mean. So when I see 45%, to me, I think, wow, well, if I was a student in school, 45% is like a failing grade. Right?
Oh, yeah, right.
So I thought, wow, am I an F? Am I getting an F in therapy skills? What is the criteria here? And I thought, and so I had all kinds of negative thoughts that I sent you on a mood log. But, I think that the thing that helped me, David, is that I reminded myself of what it was like to be in training with you at the Tuesday group when it was in person at Stanford, right? Because when I first started going there, it was a little bit intimidating for me. I don't have a long, background in psychology or anything like that. So I was relatively new relatively new to being a therapist. And so I'm walking into this classroom and sitting at the table, and there you are sitting right across the table from us. And, it would have been, I think there was a part of me that was tempted to kind of hide in the corner and maybe hold my laptop up so that I can't be seen.
Yeah.
It was a tongue twister. I couldn't say those words. And kind of try to avoid eye contact with you and just sort of learn whatever I can from a distance. And I just thought, how many times am I going to get an opportunity like this to get awesome free training from somebody who's like the leading expert in their field? So I thought, I'm going to sit right across from you and make eye contact with you and participate. And I got so much out of it. And you teach all of us in your groups, fail joyfully, right? Make mistakes. Like the only way that we're going to learn is if we make mistakes. If we're doing everything perfectly, what is there to learn? And I know I'm not perfect. I've got tons to learn. So I need to make lots of mistakes when I'm around you so that I can get, the value of your wisdom. So that's why, even though it was a little painful at first to kind of not really understand what the numbers meant, I thought, well, I got to contact you about it right away and learn what I can about it, because I just think that therapists need to learn from this kind of information.
Yeah, and therapists have a lot of ways to discount it and say it doesn't count, and what happens after the session, does it last? And actually, we have some longitudinal data I'll come to in a minute that you sent also. We can actually answer those questions. But Rhonda, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say I'm sorry, it's hard to realize that that's what you were thinking and experiencing, Kevin, because my memory of you in the Tuesday group was that you were, you volunteered, you were very brave and courageous, speaking up. You did demonstrations, you answered questions. So I can see that courageous Kevin, in your learning and participating in that group coming out in this document, that you were willing to look at this and say, oh, how am I doing as a therapist? And I really appreciate and admire that.
And you've always conveyed humility too.
Mm-hmm.
But not self-effacement, but genuine humility and warmth and compassion. And I learned something about you today that you've been keeping hidden.
Well, what might that be?
I learned it from Maor Katz, the head of the Feeling Good Institute. He says, oh, and by the way, Kevin has been working with the Feeling Good Foundation doing free therapy for people who can't afford treatment. And when I heard that, tears practically came to my eyes. I was feeling so proud of you.
That's really wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, the foundation is doing some pretty exciting work right now, and I'm fortunate to be on the board of that foundation so that we can try to bring Team CBT to people who couldn't participate in this kind of therapy if they were having to pay for it. So yeah, that's
something else we've been talking about is, our Feeling Good app can cause as much change in a day as a human therapist can generally produce in a year. And so we've been trying to set up a brainstorm with Jill, or maybe we should brainstorm with you, because we're thinking maybe there'd be some way we could collaborate and especially working with people who don't have resources. I mean, it doesn't cost anything to use our Feeling Good app, and that combined with some therapy might also produce supersonic recovery rates. I'm just babbling here, but if you want to pursue that at some point, or have a meeting with Jill or something, see if we could think of something neat. We're always collecting data because we're trying to validate and test the effectiveness of things. And it's the same with our app, Kevin. I always use the expression, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Every time we do a beta test, we get slammed on something that we thought was going to be real good, and the users say, oh, this sucks, this is terrible. And then other things, they say, oh, this is fantastic and really helped me. And, and so it's the same thing. I mean, it's a style of life to be learning from what's real rather than what you think you need in order to be happy. And failure, there's no such thing as failure. It's all just information. And if you use that information, you can use it all in a very, very productive way. Let's just look at your longitudinal data here. Let's see here. I'm looking at 50-minute sessions, and this is all disguised identities, but I just opened this first one, patient number 1, and see what happens over time with these people. And this person, had 100% improvement the first time you saw him or her. All of the symptoms disappeared completely in a single session. But then at the start of the next session, the depression had gone up to 6 out of 20, which was just a little bit of depression. But then at the end, it fell to 3. So there was another 50% improvement. And the next time, the patient was 5. So we're seeing a relapse between sessions, and then it went down to 1. So we're seeing this sawtooth pattern of recovery that I saw at the Feeling Good Institute in my study of over 11,000 therapy sessions. Patients would gain on average within sessions and then give back a portion of those gains, generally a third on average, that they would lose between sessions. But if you go on here to sessions, and so that's what this patient is doing. Here, session 4 starts with a 9, which is pretty moderate, quite a bit of depression, went down to 2 at the end for 78% improvement. But then for the first time, the next week came in with a 0 at the start and end of the session. And then following that had a 0 at the start and a 0 at the end. And the next session had a 0 and so forth. So once you're understanding, because this is something we're trying to understand with the app too, what happens when people stop relapsing between sessions, and why does that happen? Because that's what we're trying to solve with our app too. Because if we can solve that problem of relapse, solving the relapse problem is as important as developing a treatment that works fast. Do you see what I mean? Like, but it's no good to have dramatic, fast changes within sessions if they just lose it all between sessions. Do you see what I mean? But your patient here that we looked at, sure enough, kept relapsing after sessions, and then improving within sessions, and then got to a point where he or she stopped relapsing and had zeros there. At the start of session. So what causes that in your opinion? And you don't have to have a correct answer, but you can just bullshit about it.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the amount of homework that they're doing in between sessions. I learned from you that you can look when you see that that, what did you call it, a sawtooth?
Yeah.
You said, that you can usually
is that like shorthand between the two of you in a different conversation? What
do you know what a saw looks like?
Yeah.
It has teeth in it.
Right.
And if you tilt it like that, that's what the improvement curve looked like at Feeling Good Institute.
So if you tilted about a third slope? Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Great.
Yeah. So if you're looking at the chart data and somebody's getting better and then coming back and they're worse again at the beginning, and then they go down during session, but then it's back up to a high depression score at the beginning of the next session. That's happening several times. Usually you can guess that there hasn't been either very much homework done in between sessions or very high quality homework done in between. And so when I see that happening, I'll address that with the person right away to make sure that I always check in with them anyway to make sure that they're doing 30 minutes of homework a day. But then I also need to make sure that, well, what is it that they're doing? What's the quality of that homework? Are they working on mood logs daily for, at least 20 minutes of that 30 minutes? Is that a good answer?
Yeah, well, that's what the data at the Feeling Good Institute showed. Sadly, I tried to twist arms to get them to the current version of the brief mood survey says, how much homework did you do? I don't know if you have that version, but I'll send it to you if you don't have it. But the version we had then didn't have that on then. Just how much homework do you plan to do before your next thing? That was on the evaluation of therapy session. But I never had the data on how much homework that they were actually doing, which was a big loophole in my statistical modeling. But the variable that they filled out at the end of sessions, how much homework do you plan to do, that actually had a causal effect on the amount of relapse. And the more homework that they intended to do, the less relapse they had between sessions. And so I think we're on the same page on that, and we're going to check that out in our upcoming beta test of the Feeling Good app. And we have some collaborators at Stanford. We're going to try to publish this one, and because we're going to look at them for 4 weeks rather than just one day. And we're going to keep getting classes over those 4 weeks, and we're going to ask them to work on their daily mood log daily. We have this thing called the thought crusher, and our hypothesis is the amount of time they spend on those classes and the thought crusher will have to do with the amount that they're relapsing between classes, because we're already getting phenomenal results even with that relapse phenomenon. But if we could get that reduced in our patients, the app would become just breathtakingly effective. This may sound too technical to people, what we're talking about. To me, it's incredibly exciting. This is the mathematics of psychotherapy of the future. This is the science we're developing a true mathematical science of psychotherapy. And it's very exciting, but there's a human side, and that it's threatening for therapists to have to look at your effectiveness for the first time. And by the way, I had another metaphor that came to me for today, Kevin. What we're doing in this podcast and what I've been doing, it's actually like reading X-rays, reading your data. This is like, this is like an emotional X-ray machine. And then looking at the variables that change and the relationships between them can tell you stories about what's going on with your patients, as we had a couple emails on that. But it's scary. And could you share with us your daily mood log? And maybe we can do a little externalization of voices, because I know you had some pretty harshly self-critical thoughts that were upsetting to you when you were looking at your own data.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So when I first, I told you earlier, when I first looked at that, especially that, depression recovery coefficient of being around, I think it was 44%. That just seemed to me like a failing grade. And I was feeling pretty discouraged and pretty down. What would be helpful for me to review that's on the
just read your daily mood log. It was small. I saved it, and I'll have it in the show notes as for people to click on it. But tell us the event and your feelings and your negative thoughts.
Okay. Yeah. So it was a Friday afternoon at about 4:00, and I had just finished calculating the recovery coefficient for the first session for my last 10 clients. And the number was upsetting to me, and I felt sad and depressed, down and unhappy at a level 70, anxious and worried at 60, guilty and bad at 60, inferior, inadequate, defective, and incompetent at 70, embarrassed, foolish, humiliated, and self-conscious at 60, hopeless, discouraged at 50, frustrated and stuck at level 60, and angry, mad, annoyed, irritated, and upset at 70.
So these numbers are not trivial by any means. And what were your negative thoughts? What were you telling yourself?
I was thinking I'm not doing well enough for my patients. I've been fooling myself that I'm good at team CBT. I'm letting my patients down.
Slow down a little, because I'm writing them down.
Okay.
Fooling myself, letting my patients down.
I'm a fraud.
I was just looking for the distorted thoughts, Kevin.
I should be better at this by now. I should be charging less.
$2,000 an hour isn't so much.
And I suck. That's basically the summary of all of it. Yeah.
Oh, great. And then you also did a positive reframing thing on these thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, I got to the feelings for sure.
Okay.
Would you like me to read what this says? Okay, yeah.
Because it's always good to do positive reframing before you challenge your negative thoughts.
Well, sad, down, and unhappy. Those feelings really make me aware that there's a problem with the quality of my work. And it also, because I would feel so low about what I was reading, that shows how much doing my best work is important to me. And then feeling anxious and worried, that protects me from getting complacent and settling for mediocre therapy skills. And it shows I've got high standards. I guess it also, it just protects me from, it protects me from doing a bad job, for settling for bad results for patients too. I didn't put that down, but it just occurred to me. I'm going to write that down. Results for patients. And then feeling guilty and ashamed, I think is what I said. Well, it's because I haven't been living up to my own standards, and that I care about how my behavior affects others, and I take my responsibilities seriously.
Say that again. The first is not living up to my own standards. And then there were two more you gave for those.
Yeah, that I care about how my behavior affects other people.
Yeah.
And that I take my responsibilities seriously.
Yeah, cool.
And then feeling inferior, inadequate, defective, and incompetent. Those help me because they keep me aware of my flaws. And, it's important to have some humility, right? To have a humble side. And otherwise I wouldn't be able to grow. So these feelings allow me to grow. And it also shows that I do hold myself accountable to some high standards.
Yep.
Okay. And then feeling embarrassed, foolish, humiliated, and self-conscious keeps me in check. It manages my ego, keeps me from getting overly confident, and shows that I care about what others think of me. And, I want to earn a good reputation for my work.
Yeah. Sure.
And feeling hopeless and discouraged protects me from potentially devastating disappointment. And then I was struggling with this one, and I got some inspiration from feeling great, that it shows intelligence and skepticism.
Yeah, right.
And that I'm questioning and challenging my perception of my work. And I, asking myself the question, would I want to see poor testing results and not feel discouraged?
Sure.
Right. It would be kind of weird not to, right?
Right.
And then feeling frustrated and stuck. Well, those feelings are necessary for me to be motivated to improve. Nobody just wakes up and decides, I'm going to change, and it has to be too painful to keep doing things the same way in order to be motivated. And I don't want to settle for the status quo. I have great passion for my work as a therapist, and I want to deliver the best quality therapy that I can to patients. And then the angry feelings, angry, mad, annoyed, irritated, and upset. I thought that it's appropriate for me to be mad at myself for not doing better. It makes me hold myself to a high standard and not settle for crappy work, and shows how responsible I am and how passionate I am about my work.
Great. Now, sure. Now, are those things we just said true?
They are, yeah.
Are they important?
I think so, yeah.
There's three questions I ask. Are they true? Are they important? Are they powerful?
Yes.
Let me ask a question too. And Kevin, you're a therapist, so you do this with a lot of your clients, I'm imagining.
Yeah.
And so are you doing this by rote, or are they sincere and believable?
It's sincere. Yeah, not by rote. Yeah.
How did that positive reframing affect you?
Well, it really helps me with accepting myself, right? Accepting myself as, first of all, having flaws, right? And also with having negative feelings too, because I think, and of course, like you said, Rhonda, we use these tools with our patients all the time, right? So we're not unfamiliar with the concepts, but it's another thing to be looking at myself and my own feelings, and to accept that it's okay that I feel badly sometimes, right? I'll just quote you to yourself, David. One of the things this year on the podcast that had the most meaning for me was when you said that to accept ourselves the way that we are without having to change is one of the most, is the biggest change that we can often make. Right.
Say that again, because that's so important, and people might not have quite grasped that you just said one of the most important sentences in the English language.
Yeah, when we can accept ourselves exactly the way that we are without having to change, that can sometimes be the biggest change that we can make.
Right.
Right.
Right. Absolutely.
To let it be okay that I felt badly about, my work and about myself, and that I was feeling pretty low about some things about myself. To just let that be and allow myself to feel that is a big deal, right? That's because so often we're telling ourselves that we're not allowed to have our negative feelings.
Yeah.
Or there's something wrong with us if we have negative thoughts or feelings.
Yeah. Or there's something wrong with me as a therapist if I ever make a mistake.
Yeah. Right. All right. So let's go on now to the change step, and we'll just accelerate this for the purpose of time. Ordinarily, what thought do you want to work on first? I'm not doing well enough. I'm fooling myself. I'm letting my patients down. I'm a fraud, etc.
Yeah, they're all pretty good ones. I think I'm letting my patients down would be a good one.
Okay, and can we just jump right into? Just for the purpose of our audience, what are some of the distortions in that thought?
Well, it's all or nothing thinking.
Right.
Tell us how it's all or nothing thinking.
Yeah. Well, because I'm either perfect or I'm letting them down, right? There's no room for any kind of shades of gray there, right? Which in reality, I'm just a human being, right? I'm going to have my good days and my bad days like anybody else. And I think, but that's important for us to allow for, right? Like I think our patients need to see us accept ourselves as being imperfect too, right?
Yeah. That's right. What else?
Well, mind reading.
Yeah.
Tell us why. Sure, because I'm assuming that the patients are having a bad experience with me when I tell myself that I'm letting them down. Right.
Yeah, that's probably why you're getting such terrible empathy ratings from your patients. Virtually perfect scores with almost everyone, almost every session. That's cool. Yeah. What are some more distortions? We got all or nothing thinking and mind reading.
Yeah. Well, along the lines of what you were just saying, mental filter, right? I'm filtering out all the times that somebody got better, right?
Yeah.
And also when they gave a good evaluation of the therapy session, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure many therapists listening can probably relate to it. We just remember the times that go poorly sometimes, right? At least that's what I was doing here.
Yeah.
I was only thinking about the time when somebody gave, an 18 for empathy instead of 20, and thinking, oh, that means I'm letting people down.
Yeah.
Which isn't helpful, right? It's one thing to have a high standard, but that's not helpful to be so negative.
Right.
And then I put down discounting the positives as a distortion. And that's because there are things about me that are positive that I'm ignoring in this thought, right? Some people have gotten better, and they've said that, right? And that they appreciated the therapy. So this thought is ignoring that.
What's some other data that you're ignoring? How did David compare your effectiveness in one session with all the rest of the field in a year? How do they compare?
Yeah, that was amazing to hear that. And I didn't have that information at the time when I wrote this mood log for sure. But yeah, that's a big positive that I'm discounting in this thought, right?
Yeah, I need help with a metaphor. If your patients average a 44% improvement per hour, what are some things that we could compare it to that generally take a lot of time, like building a bridge? If you got a half of the Brooklyn Bridge completed in 1 hour, We'd think you were a Superman or something like that. Like, what are human change processes that take time? Like, why does college take 4 years? Why don't we just get it done in an hour?
I would love that, actually. Yeah, let's get college done in an hour.
That's our new app. I wasn't going to release it, but we have a new college app that you can get a whole college education in 1 hour.
Yeah. Sign me up. I'll get that PhD now. And I like that metaphor quite a lot, David, the Brooklyn Bridge. If you could build half the Brooklyn Bridge in an hour, wouldn't you be pleased with that? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I thought there was some emotional reasoning in this thought too, by the way, because it's like I feel guilty, so I must be guilty.
Yeah.
Right. Like I feel like I'm letting people down. But I'm using that as evidence that it's true.
Yeah.
And I thought the should statement that's in it is kind of implied that I'm saying I should, I don't know what, magically cure everybody I talk to for an hour,
yeah, exactly.
Because that's what we're learning, right? That's what you're teaching us how to do, right?
Yeah.
It's my attempt at a joke, but
yeah, no, that's we do that. Rhonda does.
Oh yeah, we attempt to jokes too.
Yeah,
we No, we pretty much cure everyone in an hour.
Yeah, in an hour. Yeah.
And
and then I thought it was a big dose of self-blame too.
Yeah, right. Your choice of distortions is exactly the ones that I wrote down.
Okay, good. Like I did something right today, right?
Yeah.
Hey, David, and, one of the things, the information we got from our
survey,
the survey that you sent out, is that people are asking for different techniques besides the double standard technique, externalization of voices.
Mm-hmm.
What would you think if we did examine the evidence for this thought?
Sure. Why don't you try it? And then once you're done, I'll go on to the good one, externalization of voices.
Okay.
The reason I use it all the time because it's so mind blowing.
True.
But yeah, let's try it, because we could attack this thought with probably 15 or 20 techniques. But yeah, try.
So Kevin, ahead. Do you have a piece of paper and something to write with?
I do.
So could you put this thought down at the top of your paper? I'm letting my patients down.
Mm-hmm.
And then draw a vertical line down the middle. I mean, I haven't asked you, is it okay if we try examine the evidence, Kevin?
I would love that. Yeah.
Okay. So just imagine that you are actually in a court of law. And in a court of law, you're going to ask the judge to weigh in on his or her opinion based on objective facts. And so that's what we're going to do with this thought. We're going to look at all the objective facts, like a district attorney and a defense attorney. What are the objective reasons to believe in this thought, and what are the objective reasons not to believe in this thought? So on the left side, let's put all of the reasons to believe this thought. I'm letting my patients down. What are all the good reasons to believe that thought is true?
Mm-hmm.
That are objective, that a judge would be able to use to base his opinion on, or her opinion.
Sure. The people are in there. When I calculated my recovery coefficient, my effectiveness in one session was a 44%, and that's kind of like if you were to look at grades in school, that's like not even a passing grade.
Okay.
So
my effectiveness is only 44, not a passing grade?
Yeah.
Just for the sake of speed of doing this on the podcast, let's just come up with 3 on each side.
Sure. Okay. Mm-hmm.
What's another one?
Yeah. Well,
You were talking about that patient who slugged you the other day, and the other one who threw a pie in your face and stuff like that.
Stuff like that. Well, this is interesting. So, I do let people down sometimes, for sure, right? Like, sometimes I'm just not the right therapist for somebody, right? So maybe evidence for this would be somebody. Uh, uh, Sometimes patients are unhappy with the treatment.
Okay.
Sure.
Right.
That's good evidence.
Sometimes some patients are unhappy with the treatment.
And a third one?
I guess, third one. Well, there are some people who try as I might, I just cannot get a good empathy score from them. Right. So there are some patients where I can't connect with them and understand them enough and give them that kind of support that they need.
Okay.
So sometimes poor empathy score. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. So those are all the good reasons to believe that thought. And what are all the good reasons not to believe that thought?
I guess the main reason is that David just told me not to.
Okay, David told me not to believe it.
Well, with evidence, for good reason, right? Because he said, that actually he helped me understand the interpretation of that score, and gave me lots of great things to think about to see that it's actually not true.
So David told me not to believe that thought because 44% improvement rate is actually fantastically successful.
Yeah.
In fact, in the paper I sent you, I calculated if you calculate the recovery coefficient per hour, let's say, and that yours would be 50% per hour.
Okay.
And then the rest of the therapists in the world are getting 44% in 6 months at best. And then if you calculate how many hours in 6 months, and then we can calculate their recovery coefficient, which I did in that paper, and that comes to like 0.01% per hour. And so then if you take the ratio of those recovery coefficients, your effectiveness is actually 5,000 times more effective than the rest of the field of psychotherapy, including the top therapists in the world who are the ones they select for these outcome studies.
Mm.
Wow.
Okay. So
I guess that's a piece of evidence.
What David just said.
I wrote, compared to other therapists, my effectiveness is 5,000 times higher.
Yeah.
I write that down, and it's hard to take that seriously.
Well, it's just a mathematical thing, right?
Yeah, just a mathematical thing. Yeah.
Now, we could be more conservative and calculate it per day or something. Say you got 50% reduction and 44% reduction in one day, and they got this similar in 1 year. Then that would be then you're only 360 times more effective.
That sounds good.
Well, when you go in front of this court, Kevin, you need David as your expert witness.
I do. Yeah.
What's another?
Some evidence against. Yeah, I guess when you look at all of the testing, most of the time the scores are good for both lowering negative feelings and for empathy.
Yeah.
Most of the time the scores are good for both a reduction in symptoms and empathy or being able to connect with your patient.
And that patients write things down on the evaluation of therapy session. And I'm sure you have a long list of horrible criticisms they've leveled against you. What do they write down?
They're very generous. They write down some pretty good things usually. Yeah.
like what?
Well, now I feel like it's thank you. This was life-changing. I never thought that therapy could be this helpful, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so we could write client statements about what they liked about the session. So client statements.
You know, the only problem with this, Rhonda?
Is we're taking too much time?
No.
Or it's too easy.
We're going to induce a state of narcissistic personality disorder,
I know,
Kevin.
exactly.
It's true.
Yes.
He's going to go out of here with a big ego.
Okay, so Kevin, looking at these two columns, what I'd love for you to do is weigh them so that the two columns together add up to 100. So they could be 50-50 or 60-40 or any other combination. And the one that is the most compelling, you would give the highest score. So how would you weigh these two columns in terms of which is the more compelling? The belief in that statement or not belief in that statement?
Yeah, the not belief.
How are you rating them?
I'm going to say like 10 for belief and 90 for not believing. And I'll only keep the 10 because I do want to be mindful of sometimes people being unhappy with the treatment and not being able to do good empathy and all that, right? Because we always have to. I don't want to, ever get complacent. So
right, absolutely.
Okay.
So then let me just close this technique by asking you, how much do you believe this thought now? I'm letting my patients down. When we started, you believed it 100%, and how much do you believe it now?
I'm going to say 0.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Groovy.
Well, let's see where we should go here. Maybe we've had about an hour in this podcast, so maybe we should kind of bring it to closer. We could do some externalization of voices, but I'm sure you'd blow the rest of these out of the water. And I would.
I think it would be fun to do like at least a couple. Externalization of voices.
What's your name, Kevin?
Oh, I'm positive Kevin.
And what's Rhonda's name?
Negative Kevin.
Okay, go for it.
Kevin, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're a fraud.
Oh, wow. That's hard for me to hear you say. I certainly don't want to be a fraud. I think that that's not true, though. I work pretty hard at learning, and I don't use anything with patients that hasn't been shown to be helpful to people, and I don't overpromise or underdeliver usually. So a fraud kind of implies that I'm going out there and I'm selling myself as something I'm not, and sort of trying to take advantage of people, and I don't think that that's true.
And who won that, Kevin? The positive Kevin or the negative Kevin?
I think positive Kevin. Yeah.
And did you win it small or large?
Large. It was, yeah.
Large or huge? I
think huge. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Awesome. Nice. Great. But I'm now the negative Kevin, and I know you. That other negative Kevin is kind of a pushover and so forth. But I just wanted to remind you that you should be better. You should be a lot better.
Oh, that's actually true. I should be a lot better. But the thing is that that's good news, because that means I can keep getting training and consultation and support. If I didn't have a need to get better, I wouldn't even be able to be here today. So that's fine.
Who won?
I did.
Big or small?
I would say that was a huge win, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think you can do all of these on a huge level. Let's see how you're feeling right now. How sad are you feeling right now? That was 70.
I'm not sad, except that this is ending soon. That's the only thing that I would be sad about. But yeah, I would say a 0 of sadness.
0.
Sure.
How worried? That was 60.
0.
0.
Yeah,
How
0.
guilty and ashamed? That was, I think, 60.
I would say also 0.
Mm-hmm. How incompetent are you feeling?
0.
0. How embarrassed are you feeling?
We feel a little bit embarrassed because I'm hoping that this is going to be interesting and helpful to people. to listen to this. I'm getting so much out of it, so I feel a little bit selfish, getting a lot out of this.
Well, we'll find out.
Time
People
together,
write in, and we'll publish your feedback, and we'll forward it to Kevin.
Hopefully it'll be very embarrassing to me. That's what I'm hoping for, but
It'll probably be really embarrassing.
So what you're embarrassed right now?
0. Yeah,
zero.
Yeah.
How hopeless?
0.
How frustrated?
0.
How angry?
That's a 0.
0.
Yeah.
And now the two questions I always ask: are these changes real, or are you just being nice to the elderly 80-year-old fart named David and the dynamic and lovely and brilliant Rhonda?
I'm actually not that nice of a person, so it's actually totally honest.
Okay. And then this is probably a stupid question, but what was the mechanism of change?
Well, I think the mechanism of change was humor, for one thing, and trust, right? Yeah, because I trust both of you so much, and the humor that we all brought to this today. And also just, some of what was bothering me was a little bit ridiculous, right? And so finding the absurdity in it, and, I like being able to accept that there's always room for improvement, but I don't need to beat myself up for that, right? I kind of want to get over myself a little bit, actually, and not beat myself up for those things. So
I would add that I think one of the mechanisms of change was your courage, Kevin, your courage to, develop look at the recovery coefficiency, and your courage to, ask to be on the podcast to talk about it and to confront these negative thoughts. I think that took a major role as well.
Thank you, Rhonda.
And you're very, you've been just awesome, Kevin. I just love you, really. You're a joy, and you're a tremendous professional, and you bring honor to yourself and to our whole profession and to the Feeling Good Institute. What would you say to a third of our audience are mental health professionals, and we'll probably over time, I imagine 20,000 people are going to download this podcast. And what would you say to a therapist who is listening and feeling scared to use the scales because they're afraid they're going to find out their empathy scores aren't good, and that their recovery coefficient isn't good, and that they're not being as effective as they've always dreamed of being? What would you say to them?
I would say think about how it is that we would help our patients who have a big fear, right? We help them face that fear, right? So that they can move through it and find joy and peace on the other side. And because when we can face our fears of failure and take a real look at our testing, that's the only way that we're going to truly get better. So it can be scary to look at empathy scores, for sure. And it can be scary to look at the recovery coefficient and see, like, how effective actually am I, instead of just kind of guessing it and assuming we know. But the only way that we can get any better is to know the real answer. And so it's an opportunity for, I don't know, getting free of the mediocrity of unspecificity.
Ooh, I love that. So the mediocrity of unspecificity.
Okay,
right? Because the numbers are specific, right? Like you can't get away from them. They're super specific. But I can not look at numbers, and I can just think, well, people think I'm kind of a nice guy, so I must be doing okay.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And then one other that came up today in dialogue with someone who's doing our engineering for our Feeling Good app. We were talking because he has quite a background in Buddhism and enlightenment and things like this, and all religions are all talking about a kind of being born again experience that people can have. I think all religions have had some concept of what we might call enlightenment or death and rebirth or whatever you want to call it. It's in all different religions. But he said today he thought that enlightenment was really nothing different from crushing your negative thoughts and getting your belief in them down to zero and getting your negative emotions down to zero and feeling a kind of a sense of joy at the same time. Would you agree with that definition, or is enlightenment something more than that, or?
I think that definition is right on. Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah, nice. Well, this has been great, and there's something incredibly important that to wrap it up. Something that I don't want anyone not to hear, because it's going to change a lot of lives. On the count of 3, Rhonda will reveal what it is. 1, 2, 3.
When we talk about the recovery coefficient and that language, sometimes it goes over people's heads and like, oh, I wasn't good at math. Oh, I don't understand what that means. But in actuality, it's very simple. What's the percentage of success or the reduction of symptoms that a client experiences in one session or in several sessions? And that's the basis of today's discussion, the percentage of success that a client feels in working with our beloved Kevin.
Yeah. That's right. What can we put a number on? How much are you helping people, so you can see? And every day, every session now, you can find out how effective you are on a scale of 0 to 100%. And if you keep doing it over time, and you want to get improved, you'll start noticing what helps people and what doesn't help people. And your patients will be the greatest teachers you've ever had, because they'll shape your behavior. And that's, to me, the greatest feeling in the world, is working with someone and seeing a sudden and dramatic change in how they feel. And it's just a beautiful experience. And so I hope you'll all have the courage to give yourself the opportunity to experience that in your work with your patients. So I think that's about it. I just want to congratulate you on what you've done with your wonderful therapy skills, and thank you too for the gift of kindness and compassion you bring to this world that is so filled these days with hatred, with violence, with threats, with arrogance. You're very deep and genuine. Humility and warmth and caring is something that our world really needs, and I, for one, just tremendously appreciate you.
David, I hope it's okay if I can take this opportunity to say how much you mean to me, and Rhonda also. First of all, you're a part of my life every week, listening to you and learning from you on the podcast, and that's huge. I was thinking this morning about, how it's been a really hard, 3 years for everybody, right? Going through COVID and some pretty major changes in our lives. And you were consistently there for everybody through that whole time. And, my 3 kids and I shout, "Hello, Rhonda," every Monday morning as I'm driving them to school, because we listen to you on the podcast, and you just become a part of our lives in that way. But also, sometimes I get a little bit choked up when I think about how much my life changed about 7 years ago, just because I walked into a workshop at the CAMPT conference taught by Dr. David Burns. And there was just magic in what you had to share with people. And to share with people a framework for therapy that helps us effectively help people, and know that that's what we're doing because we've got data that can show it, and that we can become the best therapists that we can by observing our work and learning from it and learning from our mistakes. It's been life-changing for me, not only in my work as a therapist, but just as a human being. To accept that I'm going to make mistakes and to always be willing to learn from them is a huge lesson that I've learned from you. So thank you.
Well said.
Thank you. And thank you, all of our listeners. And we wish you a wonderful week. And we'll have another exciting show for you next week. And we just want to thank you, Kevin, and I want to thank you, Rhonda, too, for just being who you are and bringing so many gifts to our podcast listeners.
And of course, it's all based on the work that you've done, David. So we all have you to thank, and thank you so much. And Kevin, it's been a joy to see you again after so long separated. I miss seeing you from the Tuesday group.
And Rhonda, I have to correct you. You called me David.
Oh.
Should be Prophet David.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, and happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays. Oh, yes, the holidays are coming up, so that's right. Happy holidays. Whatever your religious orientation, I just have a wonderful holiday.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borovsky, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.